Good morning, members, and welcome to the Audit and Risk Management Committee meeting being held today on Monday, the 23rd of March 2026. I can confirm that we are quorate. As you are aware, the public element of today's meeting is being live streamed, and those participating in the meeting have given consent to their inclusion. The recording will be available on the City Corporation's YouTube channel following the meeting, and it shall be retained for up to 1 civic year. Moving straight onto the agenda today, at item 1, we have apologies. Apologies have been received in advance from Stephen Hodgson, Naresh Sompar and Dan Worsley. Ruby Said will observe the first half of the meeting virtually, and David Sales sends his apologies for the first half of the meeting. Moving to item 2, we have members' declarations in respect of items on the agenda. No declarations have been received in advance, but do any members wish to raise any declarations? Seeing none, we therefore move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 12th of January for members to agree. Chair.
Does anyone have any? Yes, we do. We have some choice.
Chair, thank you. Page 6, first paragraph. I was a bit puzzled at the reference to the Livery Hall appointing the auditor. I wondered if that was a typo, unless I've missed something.
Chairman, it's not a typo. So the Livery Hall does appoint City's estate auditor.
Lovely, thank you. And also on page 10, the transparency bullet point, it says the charter is written as a national document. I wasn't quite sure what a national document meant in this context.
Thanks. So it's I guess it's not so much it's a national document. It's a template document that's provided by the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors. So they're the standard setters, and that's like actually the easiest way to demonstrate conformance with a quality charter.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just in relation to the point on the red recommendations, which is page 7. Under outstanding actions, it's just to add some further context to the fact that when we agreed the action at the last meeting, there were a number of overdue red rated recommendations. Since the last meeting, we've made significant progress on reducing the number of open items. We've been able to successfully close a lot of open recommendations, and that's changed the context in which the committee was looking at this. It's covered within my internal audit update, but that sort of changed some of the sort of precise action, I guess, that's taken by the since that last meeting.
And the second item on agenda item 4 on the audit and risk management tracker, that could be closed out, I think, as well. The January 26th brief chief internal auditor reported that engagement with chief officers has reduced. That I think is also ready to be closed out, and well done for that as well.
Thank you, Chair. So with the update to the transparency bullet point, are members happy to agree those minutes? Thank you. Moving to item 4, which is the outstanding actions of the committee for information.
And as we just said, there's one to be closed out. Does anyone else have a particular view on the outstanding actions in agenda item 4?
Yeah, I think we can perhaps discuss the external member recruitment action when we have a discussion on that later in private session.
Thank you, Chair. So moving on to item 5, we have the committee's work programme again for information.
And if no one has any questions, we'll take it as read. Do we have any questions?
Thank you. Item 6 is the 2026 to 27 internal audit plan, which is a report of the Group Chief Internal Auditor for information.
Matt, would you like to introduce this briefly? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The report introduces the internal audit plan for the coming year. It also sets out the basis for developing that plan. And the key things that we've considered in developing this plan are risk, organisational priorities, embedded assurance work that we may wish to undertake throughout the year, and cyclical coverage. What sits behind this is a very detailed Excel workbook which covers a number of assessments that we undertake in order to develop this plan. So there's a wealth of information that sits behind this and a lot of research across the organisation. The plan is prioritised using the same categories that we've used over previous years, and to add a bit of analysis on that. About a third of the plan is priority 1 work, so that's stuff that is considered absolutely essential to me being able to form my annual opinion on the adequacy of the control environment, risk management arrangements, and governance arrangements. Those are that part of the plan is the work that most closely aligns with strategic risks that the organisation faces, and that's some things that are categorised within our corporate risk register, but also things that are recognised as commonly occurring risks globally. There are things that are identified as part of national and global risk assessments. Then priority 2 work, that represents nearly 60% of the plan. That includes a lot of the cyclical work and like the routine coverage that we would provide across the wider organisation. So making sure that we're actually out there doing work with the operational areas of the organisation. One of the reasons we reintroduced that work last year when we expanded the resources available to the team and expanded our plan. And actually, that it's important to not forget that part of the key reason for doing that is to make sure that it serves as a useful ongoing reminder that actually good discipline and good internal control is actually not an optional thing, and it reminds people that this stuff still needs to happen. And then we've got just around 10% of our plan is priority 3 work. That's where we sort of start to consider the things that are they come from our engagement with chief officers, things that would be useful to chief officers and their leadership teams. If we didn't do a P3 piece of work in the plan year, that would probably become a P2 piece of work next year. And at the moment, we've not included anything on that 4th layer of priority, which is the stuff that is very much the nice to have. So we may come to some of that, but I think it's unlikely. And then the last thing I would just say about the plan is do expect some flexibility on this. As you see, like in my next report, we had a number of audits that were removed from the plan and a number of audits that were added instead. So it's important that we do keep that flexibility to respond to emerging issues, things that we hadn't anticipated that would be useful for us to cover. And I'll stop there for questions.
Chris, you have a question?
Yes, please, Chairman. In fact, if I may have 2. We're asked not only to note this plan, and it is an impressive plan, I have to say, with over 1,000 days being scheduled, and also I'm really grateful for the detail in Appendix 1. I think that's very helpful to members to see that. But we're also asked to propose any additional areas to be considered for inclusion. And I'd like to make a challenge in 2 areas, if I may. The first is, I note that starters and leavers are on the list, but not payroll generally. That's things like tax codes, expenses, PAYE calculations, all the normal processes which go on with payroll. And I also noted from the next agenda item, if I may, Chairman, that hasn't been covered in the last 6 months either. When did we last do a general audit work, internal audit work on payroll? And it's the sort of thing which I would normally expect to happen most years, to be quite honest. So I wonder if I could have that question answered first, please, Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, on the point, I'm smiling because on my notes I've got in a box in bold text that I should ask members for contributions. So apologies for forgetting that. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So in relation to the payroll, the challenge that we've got at the moment is the implementation of the new ERP system. So we've had to. It's just not been possible to to actually do that, the assurance work that we otherwise would have done without placing even more burden on the team that are actually, like, I say they're quite stretched with the ERP work, and also sort of factoring in, like, the work that is in the pipeline around Ambition 25 and being able to respond to that. So that's the reason why we've not been able to do the work that we'd hoped to do this year and or the early part of next year. The last time we did payroll work from memory is 24-25. So the year before we've done various bits and pieces in relation to that. Ideally we should cover some of this stuff on a more frequent basis, because actually if we do it regularly and often, it becomes an easier task. But as I said, it's the ERP is the biggest impact there. We have done other bits and pieces of work that relate to this. So within the completed work from this year, there's some the embedded assurance work that we've done in relation to the ERP system. So it's looking about how the system is being designed to build in some of the controls that we would expect to have in place. So there is some related assurance work, but not the transactional stuff.
And thanks for that, Chris. And just another point that's very similar. I was in a meeting, can't remember what it was, where we seem to have no one seems to know how many people actually work here, which I think ties directly into that. And that's quite concerning that there's Caroline.
So this is the data quality issue. It depends whether you're talking about full-time equivalents or whether you're talking about headcount, and people use them interchangeably. But of course, when you have part-time workers, that it becomes very different. I think the real focus at the moment from the financial control point of view is, let's get the modern ERP system in, because that has HR and payroll within the same system. At the moment, they're in separate ones. So to Matt's point about and Christopher's point about how frequently should we look at it, my biggest risk at the moment is about data quality and data assurance of getting the right data into the ERP system, which of course will be quality assured itself. And then I think once we've got the new system up and running and we've got the new dashboards off it, we'll have a much better shared understanding, one version of the truth of exactly how many people we do employ. And then I think the piece of where internal audit comes into that, the risk of course is changing as we go through implementation. So I think there'll be a very valuable piece of work there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say I'm less assured than I hoped to be by Matt's answer, because it is very much at the time when you do have system changes that things can go wrong. And whilst I fully accept that the new system is being checked of itself, the lack of transactional check on salaries for a significant period, and we're now talking about 25/6, 26/7, it does concern me. Now, my concern may be incorrect, but it feels that there's a vulnerability there, and most councils around the country will do transactional tests on their salaries every single year, because the amount involved is so large, and if a small error exists in a system, it can have very big effects, not only on individuals, but on the organisation as a whole. So I'm just worried that we go 2 complete years with no transactional testing by internal audit.
So I think most councils on internal audit look at it on a risk basis. Now, payroll has been our most accurate system for being able to take the full-time equivalent and headcount and the rest of it out of it. So in terms of, am I worried about the payroll system? No, in the sense that it hasn't been flagged as a high risk area. Have we got substantial amounts of money going through it? Absolutely, yes. Are we all over it anyway? Yes, because it's not just the ERP system, it's also, as Matt referred to, the Ambition 25. So as people get, we're in consultation at the moment, but once that goes into implementation, as people are moved across, there is scrutiny from individuals, there's scrutiny from their line managers, there's scrutiny from the board, there's scrutiny all the way through as to the accuracy of it. So I feel that the processes that we'll be going through there will challenge the accuracy of how people are moving. And that is going to be the critical piece that we actually need to look at, rather than the lower risk that we've got at the moment. Thank you.
In the light of that, may I just request that it be noted or agreed that early in 27/8 we should be doing the transactional testing. I understand fully what Caroline is saying, and I do appreciate the value of all of that. But I would feel a lot more comfortable to have that traditional transactional testing done as well, especially given that we would have missed 2 financial years in it. So if that could be done early in 27/8, I'd be really appreciate that. And if that could be recorded in the minutes, I'd be grateful.
Sophia.
Might add there, Chair, that as part of the financial statements audit, so not only do we do a substantive analytical procedure to look at payroll on a high level, we also, as part of our audit, have done substantive testing of payroll transactions. We didn't note any errors in the work that we did.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. And Molly, if you can, Town Clerk, if you can ensure that that's minuted in the meeting to do it going forward. And I think Gail has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, for explaining about how you came up with the plan, which I agree with Deputy Bowden is quite impressive in its nature. I know you mentioned that the plan aligns with the strategic risks. I think it would be helpful in future iterations to see which risks specifically each of the audits links to, because I think that will help also with some of the conversations that we've been having about the risk management and more broadly the risk appetite. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So we can actually cover that in the future updates. So the quarterly updates that you receive from me, you know, we always present now the plan and progress against it. We can just add that analysis in to help with that. So it's just a different view of looking at it.
Deputy Butcher.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask Matt just a comment, really? There are 54 items here. Is your programme too ambitious? That's my first point. My second point is 54 items. There are 52 weeks in a year. So it's a matter of, is it a matter, or would you agree with me that it's a matter of internal audit arriving in a department and saying good morning and then on Thursday saying goodbye? Is it just a light touch? I'm concerned that you're not going into as much detail as is required. I'd also appreciate a sort of some timelines against this on this chart, so that we know roughly which month you're doing them. Perhaps you'd like to comment.
Yeah, thanks. So some of that is information that's included in our detailed workbook, as I mentioned. So we have got we've got approximate timing. So we profiled the plan on a quarterly basis, so we know roughly which quarter of the year we aim to do the work. In terms of how much depth and how much time we spend on those audits, well, we've got a team of 6 like, you know, practitioners, as I call them, at various different levels you know, within our professional structure, actually more towards the senior auditor level now. So there are actually 6 people working on this at any one time, and broadly speaking, yes, each member of the team needs to be like, you know, delivering 1 output per week. Now that might be finalising an audit brief for a future audit. It might be issuing a draft report. It might be issuing a final report. So, like, you know, it does actually fit. But when you divide that 54 by the number of auditors available, if it's within the resource, our resource capacity. The plan is resource based, so we look at how much time is available for each member of the team, and we take into account various overheads, so like planned annual leave, professional training, continued professional development, participation in corporate wide things like the appraisal process, mandatory training, attendance at staff staff events, those sorts of things. So we factor in those, we would call those overheads, if you like, and we end up with a balancing figure of how much time auditors have to deliver planned work. And actually, when we do the maths, there is still an element of additional time in there. So there are things like the follow-up process. That's in addition to that schedule of work there. All of the follow-up work that we do is still is further work that the auditors will be asked to do. The point where it gets difficult to manage is when this stuff comes through the management hierarchy. So I'm only one person, yet I have oversight for all of those audit reviews. So it's a lot for me to do and keep my head around. Similarly, my deputy is only one person, and they have to have oversight over a lot of this stuff as well. And we've got one audit manager. So like the structure of our team does, it funnels those 6 team members in through that one channel. That's where it gets difficult. But that plan is similar size to what we've delivered, which you see on item 7. We're very close to the end of the year now. We've delivered that despite the fact that we've had in effect a shortfall of resources of around 18% this year due to various factors. I think all things being equal, that plan is achievable. As I said, it will be flexible. So if at any point we recognise we're unable to do things, we'll replan. Hopefully that covers all the points you raised. If I've missed anything, please remind me.
Do you have any follow-up?
I still, when you work it out, 6 people, holidays, 54 audits, and I just worry that you're not giving it, or you're not able to give it as much time as perhaps it needs.
I think it's a professional judgment, which I mean, from my part, I have every confidence in the head of internal audit to make that professional judgment. I think what you're asking for is the timelines to see where the balance of resources is placed. And I suspect, Matt, that when we're looking at the audit updates on the quarterlies, that would be a good place to put that data in. Thank you.
Does that satisfy you too?
Thank you for the answer.
No trouble. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I also was very grateful for the rationale behind the list in Appendix 1 and how it is largely risk-based, both corporately and departmentally. I think that's extremely useful for us to see how that happens. There was one item which concerns me, though, where we do have an identified very significant risk. It is in the Chamberlain's area, but it's wider than that, and it's political as well. And that is the very significant risk that we faced for 27/8 and onwards, so far as the local government settlement is concerned. We got through almost by the skin of our teeth in 26/7 with the final settlement and the final arrangements which were made, but we have no guarantees about what the position is going to be for 27/8 and onwards, and that can have a dramatic effect on the performance of this council as a whole. So my concern is that I know that the interim local government settlement will be announced in December 26, probably late in December 26 on past performance, and we won't get the final settlement until January or February in 27. But I'm sure that work must be being done now over the course of the next 6 and 8 months before that by officers, both on the finance side and on the political side, to ensure that we get the best possible outcome that we possibly can. And I just wonder, and I've never seen it before, I have to say, in any internal audit plan for any other council, but given that it's an identified risk that we've got, and we can even quantify the level of the risk, is it appropriate for internal audit before or the start of the budget setting process or pre-budget setting process to do some work to ensure both that we have been doing the necessary work to achieve the best possible outcome, and maybe more importantly, that we've been preparing for the worst likely outcome on the basis of what we know up to that date?
Thank you, Chairman. So the financial situation on City Fund is recognised within the Corporate Risk Register. So it is tackled there. I think the rightful place for that to be challenged is Finance Committee. And I can assure members that Finance Committee do indeed challenge that. I can also assure members that there is substantial work going on. We are in public session. And I think some of those aspects can be picked up in private, but we did have a fulsome discussion at the last Audit Committee in private session. Happy to talk the member through.
Do we have any other questions from members? Tom?
Thank you, Chair. So moving on to item 7, which is the internal audit update for information.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so recognising that this is very close to the end of the year to be making a Q3 update, we've actually I'm calling it a Q3 and a half update. So we have got the first half of the final quarter in there, and that fits with the meeting timetable, which we discussed in previous committees, and that will be more closely aligned next year with the business cycle. So in the period covered by this update, we've got 12 audits that are completed to final report stage, and we'd anticipated that Q3 would be a lighter month for us in terms of delivery, because we knew we had some resourcing constraints coming up. So we had a vacancy that we were filling at that time, and we had maternity leave that started. Both of those are now fully covered, and with those posts being filled, and we've also had a long-term sickness. So we anticipate that would dent our delivery profile. The outcomes from the work are reported in the dashboard, the appendix, and also that includes the insight reports that have been prepared for those audits, and all of those have been shared with the relevant committee chairman, either the service committee or the grant committee that's relevant for those areas. On page 52, we've got a work in progress list. I think it's important to mention that because there are actually 18 audits on that list. Now, what I can tell you, since the report was prepared, that we are on track as per that plan to deliver those items. So those items that were set out to be delivered by the time the committee meets have been delivered. There's possibly one item that's shifted from 1 week to a later point, but everything is actually on track to be delivered by the end of the year. So what's actually been completed in the last 3 weeks of this year is I think very impressive from the team. So and I wouldn't normally make such a claim. There is an additional element of the work that I've slightly separated out, because I wasn't sure how best to incorporate this within my overall sort of performance monitoring that I do, and that's the work that we've commissioned BDO to deliver on our behalf. I will embed that within my updates going forward for the coming year, but we've had to flex the timescales for some of that work, because it took us a little bit longer to actually complete the procurement exercise than we'd anticipated. So we've got a number of extra items that will still be delivered and will factor into my annual report, but it was hard to factor that into the team monitoring without skewing things there. In relation to the open recommendations, as I sort of said at the start of the meeting, we've made a lot of progress in closing some of these things down. We had a real big push and a lot of engagement with senior leadership across the organisation, and gained a lot of traction there, which includes linking in performance reporting with the regular chief officer performance reporting. That I think has made a big difference. On the overdue red recommendations, there's one listed in the report, but I think it's important that the committee don't necessarily look at this and think that's an overdue red recommendation. The action may well have been taken at this point, but we're not following up because that's one of a set of recommendations from a particular audit that have a later implementation date. So we will follow up on those on that one when we follow up on the related recommendations. So please consider that one's technically not overdue at this stage. In terms of overdue recommendations, generally there are only 23. So like that is a significant reduction from where we were, and 18 of those are less than 6 months past their target implementation date. So like, you know, in other organisations, I think you might not necessarily expect to see such timely follow-up activity from internal audit on recommendations. It might be something that gets considered in the following year. So I think we've got to a really strong position on all of that. And you know, just as a general point, we wouldn't necessarily prioritise so much follow-up work in Q4 with the profile of delivery of our work. With, you know, our main objective really is to get as many of our audits completed as possible. The final thing I just want to say about audit recommendations is our plan is expanded to 3 times the size of what it was in the previous year and the year before that. Yet the number of open recommendations that we're running with is about the same. So, you know, we seem to hang around 120, 150 open recommendations, but we are delivering 3 times as much work. So there's a combination of us perhaps taking a slightly more strategic focus with some of the recommendations we're raising, but also I think that can be seen as an indicator of more timely implementation generally. Things are coming on, but they're closing quite quickly. So I'd encourage the committee to take comfort from that. And actually, there is one more point that I just want to make at this stage. In the open recommendations, there are some that I think will be of interest, you know, like will require some closer consideration from this committee in May when we next report. Or it might be the July committee, sorry, when I do my first quarter update. And those are in relation to housing. There are 2 audits there: housing repairs and maintenance and fire safety. We've got revised target dates for those, but we are now some way out from the dates that we had originally expected action to be taken. So I think we're getting to the point where they're quite, you know, those are quite serious. But you know, management are working towards some revised dates.
Thank you for the update, Matt. And I want to say great work on getting the reduction in overdue recommendations down. That gives us all, I'm sure, a lot of comfort, as they say. You mentioned the 18 outstanding recommendations. Are they on track to finish on?
Yes, so those 18 audits that are in the report as being in delivery. I think 12 of those have actually been issued. So and you know, the remainder are on track to be either completed this week or Monday, Tuesday next week. So yes, they are very much on track. Thanks. So you'll get a lot more detail on this in my annual report to the May committee. But yes, there are some themes that come out. So a couple of the key audits to refer to here are things like the scheme of delegation or the code of conduct within the organisation. Now these are sort of quite old documents or frameworks. In relation to the code of conduct, that's actually quite a massive suite of policies and procedures, and just over time they're just they've just eroded, I guess. But actually, like, the resource that's required to maintain both the code of conduct and the scheme delegation isn't really there. So, like, if we think about, like, paring back the what might be perceived as back office functions, like that, the impact of that is that those things don't keep pace with changes. It's hard to maintain those things. So and how I anticipate writing this up is actually an erosion of the second line of defence within the organisation. So that's probably the key thing I'll draw out at this point.
Chair, thanks. Apologies if this has been covered previously. I was interested by the BDO co-sourcing arrangement. I think, first of all, I think it's very good news from a best practice point of view to have an element of co-sourcing, and I think it also potentially plays to Deputy Tim Butcher's point around resourcing levels within the team, having that ability to use external expertise, particularly in areas like IT and cyber, which I note is referred to specifically. One thing I haven't seen is the sort of governance arrangements or the strategy for use of that co-sourcing arrangement, and it may well be something I've just missed, but could you just perhaps elaborate a little bit on the governance and thinking behind use of co-sourcing like that? Thank you.
So I guess the primary reason we turned to a third-party provider was it is capacity. So it's about being able to actually deliver all of the audits that we feel we need to, and that's partly addressed our shortfall in physical resources, if you like, for the year, and then the other aspect is bringing in expertise that we're not able to meet ourselves. And so, like, cyber security is probably the main thing there. Some of the other IT audits that we plan to do, or things that require more technical specialism, they're the sorts of things that would drive drive us to commission BDO under the current contract. In terms of like the decision process, it's really sort of my assessment with my management team about whether we feel we've got the skills within the team to deliver the audits that we plan to do. If not, then we've got two solutions. One is to upskill the team or commission it, and it just depends whether it's it just depends on current workloads and whether we think it's worth upskilling the existing team or not. I guess it's again one of those professional judgment points. And then on the capacity side, that really aligns to if we have a spike on at a particular time when we might say actually like that would drive a request to BDO to pick those particular audits. The ones that we allocated on this current cycle were generally it were things that we just couldn't accommodate within the capacity of the team.
Chair, thank you for that comprehensive reply. One thing I'm still not clear on is whether it's effectively a one-off arrangement with BDO or a recurring arrangement. Obviously, there are economies of scale and certain benefits from having a call-off arrangement when you need it, and I think it'd be good to amplify that.
Thanks. Yeah. So in terms of it's a relatively short-term strategy at the moment. So we've not worked with a third-party provider for 5-6 years now, so we're sort of easing into that. We're testing to some extent how well it works within our organisation, and our current contract is up to the end of the current the next financial year, so the 31st of March 2027, and on the basis of this first period of work, if that proves to be successful, then we will undertake a longer term procurement to enter into a slightly longer term agreement with a supplier. It may or may not be BDO, but we'll do a full procurement and establish that. But my sense is that we will move along that line rather than just revert to in-house only.
Thanks, Chair. Matt, just wanted to say great job on progressing the outstanding recommendations, and really do appreciate the one-pagers, which I think are very clear. I did want to ask about the 2 reviews on page 56 that you mentioned where you might need audit and risk to help if that's not being resolved. And of course, we would be happy to. But in the interim, I just wanted to query whether those are already being followed by the relevant service committees. And also, if there's anything that you think that audit and risk management might need to do to prepare for eventually having to intervene. Thanks.
Thanks. So those are issues that the relevant committee will be well aware of in terms of, like, you know, the need for change and actually improvement in relation to certain things. The extent to which the committee are aware of the specific detail of the audit recommendations, I'm not so sure. But I can ask the chief officer more about that. In terms of what you know, what the committee might need to do to prepare for that, I think probably I'll need to brief the committee by email before it next meets, depending on, you know, progress against those recommendations. But I think it's just it's probably applying a bit of challenge to see what more can be done to actually prioritise action against these things. Because I think it's important to look at it not so much as the audit recommendations haven't been implemented. It's the fact that there are important fire safety controls that are not in place. So yeah, it's not about our recommendations. It's about the position more generally.
Thank you very much. So members, this fits in with the situation on the housing revenue account, which of course was extremely tight, and you'll be aware from court papers on the budget that government has now given us the ability to capitalise some of the revenue expenditure in the HRA, which gives the headroom to tackle a lot of these issues around progressing the repairs and maintenance and what came out of the housing inspector report. So I think we can expect to see a lot more movement on this very quickly. I know court has been very challenging on this point, so I'm sure that the housing subcommittee and children and community services are well cited. I'd expect to see movement.
I just wanted to add a little bit onto the notes on the page 56. So my first committee, so it's probably a lot of history that I'm not aware of at the moment. But on the housing fire safety, you've said there were revised target dates agreed since Q2. So that's for implementation of the audit recommendations, is it? Should these not be resolved at that point? Intervention. So what's the point? What is the date?
Yeah, so the revised dates are the 31st of March. So, like, you know,
So
a week's time.
So is it? So you must know now whether it's revised. You know, only a week to go. Are they going to hit the targets or not?
So we don't know because we've not made
Okay.
inquiries about it. So we won't make inquiries about it until after those dates have passed. And actually, whilst we do aim to follow up promptly in relation to audit recommendations, we won't necessarily, as soon as that date comes, you know, stop what we're working on and follow up. We'll, like, you know, the follow up work is sort of planned in and around the delivery of the other work. So part of what enables us to deliver, you know, a comprehensive plan of work is that we would, you know, do follow up work in the downtime on a delivery of an audit. So, you know, it's planned close to those implementation dates, but not necessarily.
So which committee is looking at the fire safety?
That should be housing.
Housing. Okay, and then so if it misses the dates, it comes back here because it's now a risk. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And just to highlight that all chief officers have had the insight reports and the chairs of the relevant committees.
Thank you, Chairman. I think internal audit is a very important process in any organisation. I believe that it uncovers issues before they become even greater impact on the organisation. I think it's also important that we as members have transparency over the responses to the internal audit. I like your single page summary, but I would just question where you say next steps and required action. If this was an external audit, the recommendations or the issues raised would be subject to a management response. And I believe that we as members on this committee should see that with the timelines. I am very concerned, and it comes back to the point that I made earlier about the number of internal audits to be undertaken in the next 12 months. That many of these recommendations may or may not be implemented because there isn't any oversight from members to say, has this been done? And then there is some proper timelines against it. All of your next steps and action required, it says that this will be implemented, that be implemented, doesn't say what it is, doesn't say what the management response is. The management response might be to say, sorry, but we don't agree. But that's the bit of the transparency which I don't think that we as members have. And it is so easy for officers to just put this on the back shelf. We know even from external audit that I have to push very hard to get the recommendations reviewed at the 6-month point. So perhaps you might give those points some consideration. And my last point is I was just looking through the list of audits completed, etc. I can't see the pension fund on there, and the recommendations were due this month. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll cover the pensions ones first. That audit has not been completed yet. Now there's a combination of the capacity, well, the availability of the pensions team to do that work. We're responding to to them, but also the team member that's actually delivering that piece of work has been absent as a combination of leave and actually sickness. That's delayed that. So that audit is in delivery at the moment and may well be completed by the end of March. If not, it will still be completed in time to incorporate within my annual report anyway. So that's it's not delivered to the timescales that we'd have liked, but it is in delivery. In relation to the level of detail on the insight reports, they're specifically designed to give a 1 to 2 minute read for people to get the key issues. And some of this is formalising some of the context that I put in my covering emails when I issue the reports to chief officers. They are supplementary to, not instead of, the full audit report. The full audit report includes the management action plan. And I'm very happy to share the full audit reports with the committee, but I'll take guidance from the committee as to what you would prefer, how you prefer me to do that, because to include the full audit reports, we're talking about me adding an extra 600 pages of reading for you all each year. So that's an audit report is a minimum. If we give substantial assurance and we raise no recommendations, an audit report is going to be 7 pages long, and now that but with issues it will run to 10 or 12.
To follow up to explain what happens with the audit reports. So this is one of the pieces of transparency that I and Sonia, I can see she's on screen, have been working with. So Financial Services Division will now include these within the finance reports that go to Service Committee. So chairman and chairs are now cited on what the management responses are to recommendations raised in their area. This way, the Service Committee, who will know and be closer to the detail and are actually responsible for the service, can then scrutinise as well the chief officer's response to that. So I think the first set of reports, I don't know, Sonia, whether you want to refer to the plans for that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chamberlain. So the reports have gone through to the chief officers as well. They've been working through it, and a significant amount of progress has been made in respect of reducing those. A revised report will go back to the chairs and deputy chairs of those committees, including when they take their budget monitoring reports, they will include the summary of where they've got to in respect of those internal audits. So that will be coming through in the next quarter.
And then the escalation that I think we've been referring to. So what is the audit and risk management need to see is where there are recommendations that have not been implemented within the time frame. And Matt has highlighted the ones on housing. But Dion.
Yes, I think that does give me a degree of reassurance. I wasn't suggesting you put the whole audit report here, but when you talk about the recommendations, I mean, something I've been pressing for is that the internal audit goes to the service committees, because I think that's really important. Clearly that's going to be done, and the reason I was just questioning the pension committee was I keep having to press this. I was saying, well, where is it? And it's not on the work program, so it could easily get lost, and that concerns me, is that all this good work is not actually delivering at the end of the day the changes which need to take place.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add one bit, which was, and thank you for raising the point, which hopefully provides the committee with reassurance or assurance, depending which way you look at it, from the officer's perspective, in that internal audit, Matt attends the Chief Officer Risk Management Group, and when it comes down to audit, internal audit recommendations, any themes, it is discussed there in terms of what has or has not been actioned and the reasons why. There is also a point of escalation to the Executive Leadership Board, which is chaired by the Town Clerk. So we would not be in the position, I can say confidently in public session, where you have a rogue, for want of a better word, chief officer saying, well, yeah, thanks very much, but actually we don't agree, and then not take action, because as we know, there might be a legitimate reason as to why something isn't agreed, and that might be because the action has already been discharged and therefore no longer stands. But there has to be a full and fulsome explanation. So in terms of the officer side, I appreciate the member, you're asking for member scrutiny, which hopefully you've received. But from the officer side, we also go through several layers of scrutiny to make sure things aren't missed. And regardless of whether a recommendation is for a particular chief officer at Chief Officer Risk Management Group, we always look across and say, but for the fact, if it wasn't in DCCS, would it be equally applicable elsewhere, including our institutions? So we do that extra bit of due diligence as well. I appreciate that level of detail isn't before members, but I thought it was important to mention given the points that were raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So moving on to item 8, we have the risk management update. For information, please note that Appendix 2 of this report is non-public.
Thank you, Chair. So picking up on the risk management update, as members hopefully remember, this is for information and therefore happy to take any questions. The only bits that I was going to cover is what's changed since the report was published, given that we do dynamic risk reporting. And also to give a note of thanks. So there's 4 points that I'll mention very briefly. The first is the thanks, and this is to Gail, the Deputy, for attending the Risk Management Forum recently. As a reminder, the Risk Management Forum has representatives from across the corporation and the institutions. They are at the kind of working level, and we thought it was really important, and thank you so much for Gail for doing this, to hear from one of our independent members on risk universe and some of the other considerations. So they used that as a learning and development opportunity, but it was also helpful for them to see and hear from a member of this committee. The second thing that I'm going to mention is the change in your report since it was published, and this is under a DCCS risk, which was about delivering the new homes programme. Since we previously reported, this originally went on as red risk, but there were some internal discussions and looking at the mitigations, which actually meant that this risk was rescored. And again, just to provide some reassurance, it was rescored on the basis of the mitigations that have been put in place and the delivery against that risk in terms of the homes that are being delivered, either being completed or nearing completion, and therefore it was on target for being rated green. The teams within DCCS are very alive to the fact that should anything change, it might be a different risk that materialises, but for the purposes of this one, it is reported as green. The third thing I wanted to draw out, although it is in your report, I thought it was important, and particularly Deputy Bowden, the points you made earlier, to draw out the new 2 corporate risks that were agreed at Chief Officer Risk Management Group. The next stages are for that to go to the Executive Leadership Board, and then it will be reported as part and parcel of our corporate risks to this committee. Those 2 corporate risks, one is about organisational effectiveness, and I think it goes to the heart of the question that was mentioned earlier when we're looking at risks, not issues, around our systems, processes, our governance, our capability and capacity, reducing duplication and so on and so forth, that it just felt like, aside from dealing with issues, things that had happened, there should be something corporately across all the institutions as well around our organisational effectiveness and what that means in practice. We also wanted to make sure that the mitigations in place were going to address probably future challenges rather than looking retrospective at things that were already happening. The other corporate risk that was agreed by a Chief Officer Risk Management Group was originally submitted as people change. This was looking at a previous corporate risk we had that was specifically around recruitment and retention. It'd been on there for many years, and when you do the test of what are the people related things that should keep us awake at night, it wasn't recruitment and retention. However, at Chief Officer Risk Management Group, in my humble opinion, rightly expanded this risk so that it was about organisational change readiness, of which people is one component part, but it also is now expanded to look at our systems, again picking up some of the points that were discussed. There is some further work to develop that as it goes into Executive Leadership Board. The 2 chief officers responsible for those risks are the Chief People Officer on change readiness and myself on organisational effectiveness. And we have got some due diligence behind the scenes to make sure that I'm not marking my own homework. And the fourth thing that I was going to mention very briefly in public session is clearly there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes in response to the conflict in the Middle East and surrounding areas. Now, some of that relates to issues, it's things that's already happened. However, thinking about what potentially could impact us moving forward, there is a lot of work with officers. Initially, this has been shared with members in 2 ways. One is from the Chamberlain and some of the financial impacts, whether it be fuel, for example, or increased costs given our fair funding, which I'm happy to talk a bit more about in non-public session, but also through our city surveyor and looking at investment properties and such like. So I just wanted to mention it here that in the context of risk, it is something that is more than just on our radar. We are also, and I've written out to chief officers responsible for our corporate risks to have a look at it through the lens of the ongoing conflict so that we're not resting on our laurels, and that work will continue. Chair, that was all I was going to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. G, information.
Thank you very much, Chair. So members, this is the update to the Treasury Management Statement that has been approved by Investment Committee and by Court. So it's in front of you today for information. What I wanted to just draw to your attention is a question that has been asked in Finance Committee and elsewhere, which of course is around borrowing and whether the financial strategy we have at the moment in terms of financing the CapEx programme, capital programme, via disposals or borrowing or whatever the mix of that should be is the right one. So members, you'll see that outlined on pages 76 and 77. So there is no change to the current strategy there, but of course it's something that we look at every year as we go through. Now, bearing in mind, of course, recent events in the Middle East, this is something that we will of course reflect on as we go through. But if interest rates are not going to reduce this year, and I think the writing is on the wall for that, and certainly the trade press are talking about potential increases rather than cuts, then this is something that we look at very carefully. Thank you.
If members have any questions, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm always interested in the Treasury management strategy of any council that I'm involved with, and the annual investment strategy was interesting, and particularly the items referred to by Caroline on capital financing and borrowing. This report was written some 8 weeks ago, and now, of course, many of the assumptions underlying this report have proven to be wrong. They were best assumptions which could have been made at the time. I'm not suggesting for 1 second they were the wrong assumptions, but as with all strategies, unfortunately, sometimes reality gets in the way of the strategy that you've got. What interests me, and I don't want to stray into finance, so I'm trying to keep this on risk management. When we set this strategy, and when we set, for that matter, our budget for 26/7, did we have any sensitivity analysis performed so far as interest rates were concerned? And was it deemed to be potentially a material matter that if the expectations weren't actually achieved? I fully accept and understand the property and investment and financial investment disposals, together with some internal borrowing, if necessary, being able to finance the external borrowing. I understand the overall strategy. What I don't understand and can't necessarily work out for myself, because there are always pluses and minuses involved in this, is whether there could be a material effect on the outcomes that we've got in this report as a result of the change in expectation as far as interest rates are concerned.
Chamberlain.
So I think, Chairman, the bigger exposure would be to inflation. Obviously, interest rates, our borrowing is external, it's fixed. So the 450 million from Cities Estate is at a fixed rate, so there is no exposure there. As far as any internal borrowing we do, of course, with that could be for City Fund using the cash balance as short term. That is something we reflect on as officers every month. So we look at that on a monthly basis. Now, of course, the Treasury management strategy is not written in stone. So if it does need to be updated at any point during the year, then it would be, and that would go through the same agreement approval process to Investment Committee, and then Court would need to approve it. During COVID, which is probably the biggest shock that we had, if I look at fiscal shock and scenario analysis on it, we didn't need to change the Treasury management strategy, although we did need to rebudget. So that might give you an indication of it. I would say there's probably more upside if interest rates go up because of the £1 billion we have in money market funds. Thank you.
Any more questions from members? Town Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully everyone can hear me now. We've had an issue with the microphones. So moving on to item 10, which is the 2025-26 external audit plans for City Fund and Pension Fund, which is for decision.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I will take you through the City Fund's audit plan. I think on this one, we'll just try to present our scope and timings of the audit, covering just the focus areas, materiality, and timing of the audit. And then I will lastly just highlight one major change in the reporting framework that we will be looking into in the current financial year. So our focus areas, Chair, will largely be consistent with the prior. The significant risk areas are just the same. Management override of controls, the valuation of the properties, looking into the valuation of the pension scheme as well. And we will report on these ones in our audit findings report later in September, Chair. That's what we are targeting. In the side of the value for money, at planning stage, Chair, if I can just highlight, we've raised one risk of significant weakness there. This is just like consistent with what we've raised in the prior year in terms of the unsustainable position on the HRA side. So we will be doing the work at field work later in the audit just to confirm if all the plans that management have put in place have addressed this key recommendation. And then I will touch on the materiality side of things. So we've previously set our materiality at 2% or below over the last 4 years. And then this year we've moved up to 2.35% of the gross expenditure. And then we've got like a range as a firm that we've set for each of the clients that we've got, and the city fund itself sit between the range of 1% and 2.5%. And this year we've kind of like moved towards the upper end, which is 2.35%. And this is also just backed by our consistent knowledge that we've built over the last couple of years working with the city fund. But just to highlight on the materiality side, we will report all errors above 800K in this broader scheme of the financial statements. But we do report anything that is over 20K in terms of like senior officers, remuneration and related exit packages. So we'll still be reporting at a lower value than the materiality. Then in terms of just the timetable, we're working towards our completion end of September 2026. But I just wanted to note as well that although the city fund is not impacted by any of the backstop date, I just wanted to note that the date next year is moving closer to 30 November 2027 for all 2026-27 audits that needs to be signed. So we're running almost like a dry run. We want to finish all of our audits by end of November 2026. So if anything happens, which in all things considered the previous years, that we don't meet the September 2026 deadline that we're working for City Fund, we'll need to work towards the November 2026 deadline. And then just touching on the part on the update on the code, this is one of the major changes that have come in, almost trying to help all the auditors and prepare us of the financial statement in terms of the valuation of properties, which is a big thing for the city fund itself, since you've got like almost like a large value when you look at your non-operating assets. So this change just gives the council the opportunity to almost focus the valuation just once every 5 years. And in the intervening years, you can do like kind of like indexation or desktop valuation, whichever that's more appropriate, which does kind of like help in terms of just managing the workload in that aspect. We are discussing with the capital asset team internally just to see how all that has been managed and all the changes are going to be reported. So at this stage, we are not entirely concerned about anything, how it's been managed. We're just having those discussions. I think that's what we want to highlight, Chair, unless there's anything in terms of the city funds audit plan that we want to raise.
Thank you very much. Do any members have questions? Tim?
Only just a point of clarification. At the bottom of page 119, it says here that the City of London Corporation will publish its draft accounts for the City Fund for 25-26 prior to the statutory deadline of the 30th of June 2026. What basis are these being published on, and how does that tie in with the page 151 being the timelines? I find that somewhat confusing. Thank you.
It's possibly an error. I don't know. Oh,
Thank you, Chair. So this ties in with what Becky was talking about around Grant Thornton as a firm looking to deliver all of our local authority audits by the end of November this year, so that we can see how prepared we are in terms of meeting the statutory deadline when it comes to the 30th of November 2027. We've asked all of our local authorities to deliver their draft financial statements 2 weeks early, so that we can get on and do the preparation work that we need to do before we start the full financial statements audits. We are working with all of our authorities to bring the timeline of the audits back a couple of weeks to allow us time to be able to finish the planned work in good time for the end of November deadline. So this is something that we've written to all of our authorities to let them know this is our plan, this is our intention, and our authorities are letting us know whether or not they'll be able to meet that earlier deadline for the draft accounts.
That's not what it says here. It says the 30th of June 2026. As far as I can see, you haven't started the audit. I can't see how you can publish draft accounts before you started the audit. I didn't understand.
Thank you.
So the requirements on local authorities is that we must produce draft statements. So I go through and I make my assessment as whether I think it's true, fair and accurate before it's passed to audit. So that, and then of course it's audited and then it's updated, but it is a requirement on local authorities to publish their draft statements, and that has to be signed off by me. But Sonia, would you come in on the timeframes as to the request for having that 2 weeks early?
Yes, absolutely. So my team will be working on that, because we don't just have the city fund accounts that we need to have the draft and the final accounts for the auditors as well, because we will be looking at the city's estate accounts to be finalised by end of November, as we have done this year. As we did last year. So in terms of bringing the dates forward, I don't see that to be a problem. We do need to we do need to get to a point where we finalise the city fund accounts by end of September. Anything later than that will become a problem for us because of capacity and also to meet the city's estate deadlines.
thank you, Sonia. Ian, do you want to come in on this? Or are you happy?
I think I was just going to say, similar to what the Chamberlain has just said, for clarification, the 30th of June is the deadline for the draft accounts to be published, after which there has to be a public inspection period as well.
I think if that was changed to draft unaudited accounts, Tim, would that make more sense? And possibly we need to update the draft unaudited accounts on. Yes, so it's so that makes that clear.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just to cover the pension fund now as well then. So we've got 2 reports in. I'm picking up on the earlier point. Yes, the statutory deadline is the end of June for draft accounts that have been approved by the Chamberlain, and then the audit starts, and that really is to kick off the public inspection period, which is different to what you'd see in corporate accounts, because you have to give the members of the public the opportunity to review those financial statements, and then the audit kicks off. I'm going to pass over to Jasmine to take you through the plan, but you will see slightly different dates for the pension fund. That's because locally we've agreed that actually the pension fund has the ability to produce its accounts a little bit earlier. So that's why, in a way, it's a slightly different timeline for us in the pension fund. But I'll hand over to Jasmine to take you through the key elements of the pension fund plan.
Thank you, Grant. So to introduce our audit plan for the pension fund this year, I'd like to clarify that there are very limited changes to our previous audit plans presented to yourself for the pension fund. Our significant risks will focus on the presumed management override of control that we are required to look at for all entities, and then also the valuation of level 3 investment assets, which are the sort of the most high profile investments and sort of the unmarketed
asset basis that we looked at the assumptions, etc. for. For this financial period, the pension fund is going through a triennial membership evaluation with the actuary, which feeds into the IS19 reports used by the City Fund, City Estate, etc. So as part of our scope of work for 25-26, we'll be performing procedures in relation to the data sent over to your actuary, and then performing procedures in relation to the completeness of that data, as well as selecting a sample for testing. And that is included within the audit fee agreed within the contract. And then finally, just taking things back to timeline. So for the pension fund scheme, as Grant had alluded, we've sort of agreed locally with the pension fund team that we will run to a slightly earlier timetable. This means that we can share our S19 letters with colleagues in the City Fund audit, but also City's Estate can access files sooner, and then also at the Museum of London. So we've outlined our audit deliverables and milestones on page 189 of the pack, which aligns with the sort of earlier sort of logistics and timetables within our report. It once again sort of reiterates around the draft financial statements publication date, and then our planned period of sort of undergoing detailed audit work. Happy to take questions at this point.
Do we have any questions from members on the pension fund? No. I think there is one small item that we mentioned in call over on page 245 that mentions maintaining 3 independent members, and I think we agreed a change of wording to attempt to maintain, but we'll come back around to that, and hopefully that won't be an issue going forward. Town Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask that members are happy with the recommendations set out in the report with the changes to the independent members and the draft added as well? Is that okay? Thank you. So moving on to questions on matters relating to the work of the committee. I have not received any questions in advance, but do members have any questions to raise? Seeing none. Moving on to item 12, we have any other business that the Chair considers urgent. Chair.
And I do have some any other business today. As some of you will know, this will be Alderman Prem Goyle's final meeting as chairman, as he will be stepping down from the committee next month. I want to record our sincere thanks to Alderman Goyle for his hard work, commitment, and dedicated leadership over the past 3 years. We appreciate all he has done and his contribution to the committee's work, and extend our best wishes to him for his future endeavors, which we're all looking forward to as well. And if I could say, let's thank you, Prem.
Thank you, everybody.
And moving on to item 13, the exclusion of the public. Are members content to exclude the public?